So here we are, the day has arrived.
Yep.
The meeting is going to take place in a few hours, and the gap couldn't be more glaring, could it? The Prime Minister wants America to guarantee Ukraine's security. Yesterday, President Trump explicitly said on camera, no doubting about it, no, that's down to Europe. Yep. He was explicit about it. How is Sir Keir going to solve that conundrum?
Well, this is a hugely significant day. It's a hugely significant day for the future of Europe's security. It's probably the most significant moment of Keir Starmer's premiership, maybe the most important moment of his premiership so far. If he can get a deal with Trump, if he can get an agreement that there will be some form of security backstop in Ukraine, which brings peace to Europe and secures the future security of the European mainland, and that would obviously include us as well, then that is of utmost importance. You're right to say Trump appears to have ruled it out, but Trump is also really interested in this deal around what we call critical minerals. And this point about critical minerals, my hunch is this, Richard, that we're going to be hearing more and more about critical minerals over the next 12 to 18 months, because this is all the very rare metals that go into all the technology, all the AI, some of the modern defence equipment that we need. We're totally reliant at the moment on China for a lot of those critical minerals, and actually we all know that how risky that is. And I think
when you say we, is that UK and America?
So many countries around the world need these very rare metals for the modern technology.
But
so I think this is really important.
Zelensky's power, I guess, to get it played. Could there be an argument then for that Trump, as we always hear, is a businessman?
He is.
Doesn't want peace is better because it's more profitable.
Well, look, I think...
Could he then put a force in and say, I haven't gone back on my word, I put a force in to protect American investments in Ukraine?
Exactly right.
He could frame it in a business way.
What we're going to see today, I don't think we're going to see much flesh on the bones of a deal, frankly. I think there'll be lots of warm words. I think Sir Keir and the officials around him will be very nervous about what Donald Trump is going to do and say, because he's very unpredictable, as we all know. And I think, they would have gamed every scenario, but there'll be things that they haven't thought of that Donald Trump could say or do that could put Sir Keir in a difficult position.
Well, what does OK, let's war game it here. What does Sir Keir do if Trump says on camera at the conference when they're sitting side by side something along the lines of, I've made it clear to the Prime Minister that I regard and America regards Europe as taking the responsibility for Ukraine's security, and he knows that that's my view. What does Starmer say?
He'll say something like, of course, Europe does have responsibility to some degree for the safety of Ukraine, but we have to work more widely with our allies, i.e. the United States, to really make sure that this peace can last. Because the main fear is that once the ceasefire, if there is one, if the deal is reached, the main fear is that Russia will just have another go in a year or two. And in order to prevent that, I think there has to be some sort of American...
Will Trump want in any way to help our Prime Minister manage the optics of the meeting?
No.
He won't
have any interest.
He won't care.
All he'll care about will be the spotlight on Donald Trump.
So, he landed at midnight. So we understand he might be getting a little bit of sleep to prepare.
He'll be at the embassy.
But then also, on the plane, days before, and maybe again today, you'll think they'll be, as you said, wargaming it. So you've both been in situations where you have to do a public moment about a tense negotiation. What sort of things do you rehearse? Do you literally think, right, if he says that, this is going to be my expression, this is going to be my... How does it work?
I mean, there will be all this war gaming going on, and obviously Trump is such a unpredictable personality, right? We all know that, and look, nobody can walk into that room, to that conference, and everyone's going to be on the edge of their seats wondering what's going to come out of his mouth. That is certainly true. However, in these situations, right, there will have been armies of civil servants, officials on both sides, Sherpas, we tend to call them in Whitehall, having discussions, with papers going back and forth, trying to get an agreement about the broad outline of the discussion.
So they can find some common ground publicly.
That's sort of planet normal. That's a normal situation.
Right.
So if it was just a normal another Obama, Clinton, Bush, whoever... that would work very nicely, and it would be all orchestrated.
But Trump goes off-piste.
Whereas this is the issue, and he does that deliberately. And that's where I think a lot of the officials' work will be cut out, because they won't know
I mean, we've got the Oscars, haven't we, on Monday morning? And there'll be lots of stars practising their face for when they lose. And the camera's on them. It feels a little like that.
Yeah. And I think Trump is, he loves theatre. I mean, you've got to remember, the main thing he did was The Apprentice. That's arguably the most successful thing he's done before he became president. So there'll be moments of drama that he will want to inject in the situation.
How much longer can the rest of the world put up with this? This completely unpredictable president. This isn't just a moment in time. It's going to be like this for the next 4 years.
Yeah.
I mean, the things that you simply can't predict. Look at yesterday. We saw this video that Trump reposted, Trump Gaza. An extraordinary and many people found quite upsetting set of images.
Deeply offensive.
And yet Trump reposted it, which was clearly his unspoken endorsement. He's obviously
Is that the one with the golden statue?
Yes, the golden statue.
Yeah, it says Trump Gaza, a little bit like Trump Tower. And it's
like a rap, it's like a rap video. It looked like
there's a statue. Now, nobody could have predicted that.
You couldn't.
No, but we're going to have to get used to this, aren't we?
So I think
it's going to be like this every day, every week.
I think actually you can see. So the critical date will be November next year when the congressional, the midterms.
Right.
That's when they have their congressional elections. The House of Representatives. And I think if the Democrats win, and it's a very finely balanced at the moment, I think the whole Trump show will grind to not a halt, but I think he will be. His power will
because he can't get stuff through.
Because he won't be able to get stuff through, and also he'll have 2 years. We have that situation with you really do have a lame duck president who can't be re-elected, and he's got the last 2 years. And I think a lot of this stuff is going to die down.
And who votes in that? Is it the public?
Yeah, it's the whole.
So there's no guarantee, is there, that whatever the reality we might think, the politicians of the US might think, that he won't still have that same groundswell, though?
Well, I think that generally what usually happens is that there's the party in government that controls the Congress presidency. There's usually a backlash against them in the midterms. That's what we've seen over the last.
Elections.
That's right. We've seen
that
over the last 20 years.
There's a long way between now and next November, and we've seen how fast Trump moves at pushing stuff through. And the thing is, unlike previous presidents, I mean, we've all read and seen the transcripts which have been released from years and years ago of presidencies like Kennedy, where at tricky moments, Kennedy would be told by advisors in the Oval Office, no, Mr. President, you can't do that. No, Mr. President, you have to think again. And he took it on board. We saw a moment at the press conference yesterday with Trump when he was asked how he would deal with members of his cabinet who defy him, who argue with him, and this was the exchange. Oh, we don't have it apparently. Well, to summarise, to summarise, it was the press conference angle at the end. A journalist said, "How will you treat members of your cabinet who don't agree with you?" And he basically said, "Well, they will." Because if they don't, they're toast.
That's right.
So he's not prepared to take anything on board, is he?
No, I mean, he's the strongest he'll ever be because like new prime ministers, you've always got your most political power when you've first been elected. So, Kwasi's right. Where is he once that there's more midterm elections in America? Does that weaken his position? We will see. But even if the Democrats took back control of the Congress and the Senate and so on, it's not going to stop him putting out those mad offensive videos about Gaza, for example, and making quite incendiary comments about Gaza.
Or making false claims. I mean, he was saying again yesterday that he has a deal. America has a deal with Zelensky, and Zelensky will be there on Friday to shake hands on it. Zelensky's not saying that at all. No. Zelensky's saying, well, we have an outline agreement, but there's a long way to go, and our security with America is absolutely critical to the deal. Sure. And Trump was already saying America won't play that game.
My view on this whole Trump show, I mean, it's almost like a show, is that the public is going to get bored of this at some point.
Yes, I agree.
Do you know what I mean? I mean, we've seen all the stunts. He had his first term, then he was out, then there was all the drama with the trials, now he's come back. And I just feel that
But do people, when they get bored of it, if they do as you say, does that mean that they want rid of him? Or do they just think, oh, it's Trump doing his thing?
Well, remember, he's only got 4 years.
Yeah.
He can't run again.
He can't.
No.
So there will become a point in, 2 years' time when everyone starts talking about who is the next presidential nominee for the Republicans and who's the presidential nominee for the Democrats. Things will move on.
Things will change.
But that's why he's putting so much energy
I think you've got 2
now.
years. I think Jonathan's right. I think once, the midterms happen at the end of next year, then all the people will start jockeying for 28, the presidential election. Yep. And at that point, I think Trump becomes less interesting.
Yep.
Right. So, look, Ukraine is obviously the main focus and the conversation we're having about this meeting in Washington, not least because it's peace in Europe that's hanging in the balance that we're all very nervous about and want to support Ukraine on. But there are other factors too that are important to us, aren't there? Not least tariffs.
Sure.
Now, he's already said that 25% is the tariff that the European Union are going to say. He said, I'm going to announce that soon, and then announced it. So it's unsure whether it's definitely happening, but Trump's done his thing and said 25% for the European Union. Unclear where we stand and whether this actually could be an advantage of Brexit, because he might treat us differently.
Well, I was going to say he might do, and look, let's hope that we're not slapped with tariffs. But
Just remind people, actually, Jonathan, why that's important.
Well,
you know, why we don't want to pay that.
Because we are a open trading economy, and trade is good for our economy, and America is an important partner for us when it comes to trade. It's not our biggest partner, but it's still a very significant partner.
As a country, it's our biggest partner.
Yeah.
It's
The EU, no, but in terms of, altogether. But the EU is bigger than America. But as a one country, America is the biggest.
But, however, the other thing, though, in my view, you might disagree, I don't know, Quaz, I'd be interested, tariffs is going to hurt his economy, because it's going to push up prices in his economy, which I think means the Fed, which is their bank over there, is going to have to put up interest rates, which is going to have an impact on the overall global economy.
Now, why is that going to happen? Because if they charge us, isn't that a benefit to them?
Because he's putting up prices. He's putting up the price of goods,
we then
basically.
put our prices up, everybody puts
the price of
up.
goods will be more in the US. So I believe in, trying to reduce barriers to trade, not increase barriers to trade.
It's a knock-on.
So on the Trump tariff question, I can see his point of view. He's essentially saying, why should we take all this stuff in China where they use slave labour, they don't have our health and safety rules? Why do we have to just take that in and damage our own producers, our own workers
who can't
compete with that? So we're going to put tariffs. I get that argument. But against the EU, where there are similar health and safety rules, there is a similar sort of economy, that's very aggressive.
Well, the EU has said that they will strike back.
Yeah,
They've already said that if these tariffs of 25% are imposed, they will hit back straight away. One more question before we move on to other stories, because believe it or not, other things are happening in the world. One thing we can predict about Trump is that he loves a deal. He actually enjoys making deals, and it's his thing. So what can our Prime Minister offer him to get something back? For example, like a guarantee of a backstop in Ukraine. I'm thinking of the Chagos Islands, maybe abandoning plans to give those away. I'm thinking of gifts. I'm thinking of a one-to-one with the King of England.
That sort of thing.
That's on the headline.
I think you could never underestimate Trump's personal vanity. So, when he came over, his mother, after all, was Scottish, so he had that link with the UK. And he was a great fan of Her late Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II. And he took all of that, the pageantry. He loved it. Yeah, I knew people who were in the Special Forces, and he went out to see them. And he was apparently really excited. He was very excited to see our Special Forces.
So do you think that there is the possibility of a deal like that being...
Well, that will be part of the mix. I mean, it's not going to necessarily prevent tariffs, but it's part of the kind of package to try and, sort of soften his approach.
Well, he had a state visit before with Her Majesty, the Queen. I think he would love nothing more than to have a second state visit with our King. And it wouldn't surprise me if that gets confirmed or announced in the next 24 hours.
And he'll want to address Parliament as well.
Yeah.
And he didn't last time because people thought that was a bit too sensitive. But he will want to address.
That will be such a spectacle because most of them hate him.
Yeah, they do.
Let's be honest, most of them detest him.
But I think that sort of ceremonial he takes very seriously.
But I think MP, I would go along to it because you'd be intrigued. You'd want to see what he's like. You want to see what he's like in person. You want to see how he interacts with your parliamentary colleagues.
Absolutely. No, it'd be a big event, there's no question.
OK, should we talk about dentistry? Figures that we'll be talking about later on in the programme, British dentists are saying that there are 2.2 million people who desperately need to see a dentist and who simply cannot. We've been reporting this story for 2 years now, and it just won't go away.
I know, it's absolutely shocking. You can't get an NHS dentist for love nor money these days, can you? And you've got now this phenomenon, they call it DIY dentistry, where people are pulling out rotten teeth with pliers at home.
In the kitchen.
I mean, it's horrendous, isn't it? And obviously, people are doing that, causing themselves a lot of pain, often damaging their mouth, horrendously as well. Look, this Labour government wants to put more investment into dentistry. It wants to get access to an NHS dentist for people, but you cannot turn around this overnight, given that these problems with dentistry have gone on for years. It's partly to do with a really boring, complicated contract that the NHS dentists have, which just needs to be ripped up and start again. And it's too sort of technical.
Why is that? They're paid too little for the market. Is that the nub of it, or not?
There was a contract that was put in place, I think, in the late 2000s. It was under the previous Labour government. It was negotiated with the dentists at the time, but at the time, people thought it would work, and I don't think anybody thinks it's fit for purpose.
No, clearly not. No.
And it's sort of been it's sort of been kicked into the long grass because.
But it's very difficult to engage, those professional. Once they've got a deal, to unstitch the deal is very difficult, and that's
because there's no motivation for them to do it, presumably, other than the morality, of wanting to help people, which I'm sure they do in their own way.
And governments haven't wanted to put in the levels of investment that's needed.
Well,
when the finances have been tight.
So 700,000 promised. I believe those are starting to be rolled out, and there'll be more in April. But what kind of timescale are we talking about, particularly as apparently that's a drop in the ocean to what's needed?
Oh, absolutely. And I think this is one of the things that the Labour government's really got to deliver on. When I was the MP in Leicester, access to dentistry was one of the biggest complaints I used to have from local residents about NHS services. That and getting a GP appointment. They were the two big things that would come up consistently. And quite rightly, Wes Streeting, my friend, is focusing on this. But as I say, you can't turn this around in 7 months. It's going to take a few years.
And it will be a matter of resources. Yeah. And, we're talking about putting up defence spending.
Yeah.
And I'm very interested to see if that happens, what the flow through in terms of other services.
The other risk, of course, is actually to life and limb. We're going to be talking in about an hour and a half now to a 22-year-old student, a guy called Nick Whelan, who very nearly died because of this problem. Yeah. He was struggling for months with really bad toothache. He was in agony, and he could not get a dental appointment. And eventually, the whole thing went rotten. It turned septic. He got sepsis. He had to go into hospital. He was put into an induced coma. He was on the verge of death. He spent weeks in hospital. He still hasn't fully recovered. I mean, it's really impacted this young man's life. It's blighted his life. There he is, on the edge of death, because he couldn't see a damn dentist.
Yeah. I mean, we tend to think, don't we, that it's very painful toothache and very, disruptive. But we often forget that there is a health risk. I mean not seeing a dentist can affect your fertility, it can affect all
the
sorts
infection,
of things.
as in the poor lad's case, can be devastating.
Yeah, we sort of forget that the health of your teeth actually impacts your overall health. It also has implications for blood pressure, heart disease, and so on. We completely
and infection as well.
And talking about going backwards as a society, I remember when I was at school in the 1960s, two of my fellow pupils, I went to school in the East End of London, used to bring in salt and pepper sandwiches because that's all their families could afford to give them. They couldn't afford school dinners. They weren't free. So they brought salt and pepper sandwiches in. They were very, very malnourished. Now, that was 40, 50 years ago. We're going to be talking later in the programme about the fact that more and more children, and this is a statistical fact, are either skipping meals completely at school because their parents can't afford to either give them food or pay for food at school, or they're eating very, very sparingly or rubbish like a salt and pepper sandwich. How have we got to that in 2025?
Oh, I know. I mean, this is like, we've got something like 4 million children living in poverty. I mean, I think that is utterly unacceptable. It is heartbreaking. We should... I think politicians, when it comes to their decisions, I think they should always prioritise the well-being of children because, if you're not going to put children first, what are you going to put first? And I would encourage my government to do more to lift children.
But we do have free school meals. There was a whole debate about that.
We're talking about kids who don't qualify for free school meals.
So there's...
Sorry.
Well, actually, no, I think that's the crux, isn't it? So the free school meals are there. London, you have free school meals up to year 6.
Yeah.
Other parts of the country, not. And the argument is that everybody on universal credit, more people should get access to it, which is very patchy and postcode, because then you capture more of these vulnerable youngsters and give them at least one meal a day. Is there an argument against that? Because we know that school meals, like everything else, have gone up and up and up.
Well, I mean, the only argument against it is public finances and money.
Exactly,
but the Labour government is actually trying to roll out breakfast clubs. So every child should start school with, a hot, warm breakfast in their tummy. So so they're not going for the free school meals point, they're going for the breakfast point. They've started rolling that out this week.
It's more sensible because you've got, at the start of the day, if you're fed, you're much more likely to want to learn or be in a position where you can actually absorb what your teachers...
Well, we're going to be talking
Well,
to...
they're saying there's evidence. Well, as you're about to, I'm sure you're about to say, we're talking to a teacher, Anne-Marie Ferrigan from Liverpool, who says, you know, her teachers are buying their children lunch and food for lunch because they see the direct impact on the learning for the afternoon if they're not having food, and their heart's breaking, frankly, for it. So, you know, breakfast club's great, but also maybe lunch can often be the only meal that those youngsters are eating all day, isn't it? That's the tragedy of it all.
She's going to be telling us that these children, she sees them falling asleep at their desks. Their blood sugar
Yeah, but what is the
so
answer?
low.
I mean, we're not proposing, or are we? I don't know, that everybody should have
no,
free
but
lunch at
just
school.
raising the capture point, because at the moment it's
So it's a debate about
£7,500 income into the home.
Yeah, because
that means you can have it.
Not everybody, if you're on universal credit, it's doesn't mean you necessarily get free school meals. That's the issue. Now, whereas on private benefit systems, you would be passported over.
But it's not that simple.
But there is expensive. I mean, this stuff costs money.
Of course, it's money coming from everywhere. Can I just have a quick word? We were talking about health generally, and I thought you were going into it when you said things have gone backwards.
Yeah.
This, on one level, is, you could say, was clever thinking by the University Hospital Sussex NHS Foundation Trust, not the catchiest of title, because what they've done is they've officially posted an advert for a full-time doctor to be a corridor doctor.
Seriously?
Specifically focused on the treatment of elderly patients who get held up and stuck in corridors of the hospital. Now, on one level, do you think, great that there is a doctor there to look after those people, because we know that doctors and nurses say, you know, that terrible incidents have happened of patients dying and getting lost because they've been left in a corridor and not under a ward system. However, have we come to the point that we're accepting the corridor is the place where people are going to be treated?
Look,
I think it's very... you can say that, but you've also got to be pragmatic and practical. And they're saying, yes, this isn't an ideal situation, but given the fact that it's happening, we've got to deal with it.
Can you imagine any other country in the world advertising for a corridor doctor? I mean, what a statement of failure.
I mean, it is a statement of failure, and it's an indictment of where we are with the state of the NHS. I mean, the truth is that, I mean, and what a lack of dignity as well for the... I mean, nobody would want their elderly parents, loved ones being treated in a corridor, left on languishing on trolleys in corridors because there's no bed for them to go into.
It's not acceptable, but you know, to make that advert, you're basically saying, look, we're going to deal with the practical situation.
Yeah.
Because we'd rather they had a doctor specifically treating them than just be left without anything.
The fact is, I mean, you know, the resources are being stretched. I think, you know, something we never talk about, but there's a much bigger population than we had 20 or 30 years ago. Yeah. And resources aren't going as far as they used to.
But it's also a failure of what we call social care, because essentially what you have now is, particularly at winter time, and particularly with our elderly loved ones, you've got people queuing up to get in the hospital and queuing up to get out of the hospital because there's nowhere, you cannot discharge them because you cannot be confident that they'll be looked after properly in their home or that there is a care setting for them to go to.
That's a big issue in terms of when people are leaving.
With 2 minutes left, can we just lighten the mood a bit here? Wonderful statistical report out this morning calling Britain's top 15 small wins. Apparently, all of us love and enjoy and count up and mark the moment when we get what we call a small win during the day. Things like...
Makes your day.
Finding cash in an old wallet.
That's good.
Found an old wallet, and there's a 20
or
in
a pocket.
62% of people say that gives them a thrill. Getting around to doing a chore you've been putting off, but you eventually do it and you feel great because you've done it, 53%. Being cooked for, 42%. I haven't been cooked for 30 years.
Are you the cook in your house?
My wife walked in one years ago when the kids were small, when we were splitting everything, and she said, I'm going on strike. I said, what? And she said, I'm just not going to cook for a while. I said, OK, and I thought she meant a week or a month.
That was it.
45 years later.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I don't mind. The sun, here's another one. The sun coming out during a walk, 41%.
Oh, that's a lovely moment, isn't it, when you get the burst of rays?
I love this one. Choosing the fastest queue at the supermarket, you know. And you're right, you're ahead of that person that you would have been behind.
Yeah.
What's yours?
Dear, lovely. A good hair day is number 6.
Good hair day?
I'd love one of those.
Hair day, yeah. Or getting through the self-checkout without it beeping and saying you've placed it in the wrong spot.
Yeah, that's good.
You can get through it without an error.
Yeah, there's a lot of supermarkets.
Also finding notes. I mean, because... I don't know about you, but we use cards all the time.
Yes.
Particularly in London to pay for things.
Yes.
So if you've find a fiver or something. That's just, it's really good. It's a really
lovely,
good feeling.
and it's a really tangible
that's
feeling,
right. You
isn't
can
it?
feel
'Cause
it,
it's
absolutely.
physical and real.
And here's one that I occasionally get when I'm driving in. It takes me 20 minutes to drive in from where I live. There's about 16 traffic lights I have to get through. And this is number 15 on the list. 26% of people cheer when they have this. Being late, but hitting every green light.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Is that yours, Jonathan?
Well, I like it when you get, when you get on the tube and you just get on just as the train is leaving.
Love
Even though
that.
the next one is like 2 minutes away, you still think
you just think, ooh, that's a
it's
win.
made a big difference to your journey time.
Well, we'd love
Do
yours.
let us know yours. Yeah, I was thinking the same
Give
thing.
us
Let
yours.
us know your wins. What makes your day? Those little moments. Maybe you've had one already.
Oh,
Of
here's
5
one.
to 7.
Number 11, an attractive stranger smiling at you.
Oh.
Oh.
Very
Been a while
nice.
since that.
Yeah, OK.
There we are.